views expressed on this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers, and are not necessarily those of this station, its management, or other advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.
This show's audio was via a Skype call.
Welcome to Knowledge Book Radio with Marge Potasic. Marge was searching for the purpose of her life and the truth that would tie everything together to make sense of what was taught and what was happening on our planet, the fire that was creating all the smoke. Through many experiences, she was finally led to the knowledge book that provided all the answers. Marge is now talking about this gift to humanity on Knowledge Book Radio, so all can be united in peace, love, and harmony. This live call-in show at 1-800-930-2819 is amazing. So get ready to hear about the knowledge book. Here's your host, Marge Potasic.
Hello, everyone. I'm Marge Potasic, and you're listening to the Knowledge Book Radio with Marge Potasic on Transformation Talk Radio. And as we've been doing for a while, for the next hour, we will continue our series of Omega Talks. And these I usually give at the end of the month, and this is part of the unification program of the Call to Friendship Association established in Turkey for the entire planet, and that is mentioned in the Knowledge Book in more than one place. Now, what we're doing in these talks is actually we're connecting science and the knowledge of the world to spirituality by discussing and connecting it to the Omega dimension. Now, of course, the Omega dimension, those of you who have read the Knowledge Book will know that the Omega dimension is the 19th dimension, and it has been open to us in the world through the Knowledge Book for the first time. We, of course, are mostly trying to get to the 18th dimension, and once we're at the 18th dimension, which is the dimension of Alpha, which is the dimension of love, we get introduced in some way, shape, or form, or fashion, to the Knowledge Book, and the Knowledge Book's job then is to basically give us answers on what came before, expand the knowledge that was given to us before, and take us from the 18th dimension to the 19th dimension. At the 19th dimension, which is the 76th energy level, where Alpha is the 72nd energy level, we are then genuine humans. We have reached the point where our evolution level, our consciousness level, and our essence, or their spiritual totality, is equal, at which point we are then giving the permission to leave this planet and to go on to the advanced dimensions. But we could talk about that further at a different point. Right now, I would like to tell you that the United States website for the Knowledge Book is www.usa.theknowledgebook.net. The Turkish World Brotherhood Union website is www.dkb-mevlana.org.tr. And please do remember that World Brotherhood Union, it's not only brotherhood, it's brotherhood, sisterhood, because the Turkish word Kardesh is actually, or Kardashlik, is actually represents both genders. It is not gender specific like it is in the United States. That state of brotherhood, sisterhood is not gender specific in the Turkish word Kardeşlik. Okay, and of course my contact information for telephone calls, for texts is 973-787-7035. My email address for, again, information, questions, and suggestions for topics is mmjp99@gmail.com, Mary John Peter 99@gmail.com. The Call to Friendship website, because this is the part of the program that we're working with today, is www.calltofriendship.org. Again, www.calltofriendship.org. And again, please do send any questions that you have from today's topics or from previous shows. Thank you all who have given me questions and have called, and who have given suggestions. And thank you again very, very much. Okay. So today we are going to be talking about language. And we, of course, know what language is since we're working with it on a daily basis. We use language on a daily basis, but let's go into what the dictionary tells us what language is. And it has 5 different definitions for language. The first is a body of words and the systems for their use common to a people who are of the same community or nation, the same geographical area, or the same cultural tradition. For example, like the 2 languages of Belgium, the Bantu language, the French language, or the Yiddish language. The second definition is communication by voice in the distinctly human manner, using arbitrary sounds in conventional ways with conventional meanings, otherwise known as speech. The third definition is the system of linguistic signs or symbols considered in the abstract, as opposed to speech. So whether that's the language of algebra or the language of math or science. Fourth definition is any system of formalized symbols, signs, sounds, gestures, or the like, used or conceived as means of communicating thought, emotion, etc., the language of mathematics or sign language. And the fifth definition is the means of communication used by animals, like the language of birds or the language of the whales or the language of the dolphins. They have their own particular sounds, they all have their own particular ways of communicating with each other, and it is a systemized methodology that they use to communicate. Now, where did this language come from? How did it all begin? Well, no one knows, really. Even linguistics and those individuals who were questioning about language back in Egypt, 525 BC, in the 26th dynasty, they didn't know what language was then. We don't know what language is now, and we don't know where it came from or how it arose. However, while it is widely understood that our ability to communicate through speech sets us apart from other animals, language experts, historians, and scientists can only hypothesize how, where, and when it all began. However, there are some new findings that are providing new insights about the origin of language. So there was a gentleman, his name is Quentin D. Atkinson. He is a biologist at the University of Auckland in New Zealand, and he conducted studies where he found, and he's suggesting that language originated only once in a very specific place of origin, and that may be the southwestern part of Africa. Now, most studies of language or languages focus on words in order to trace the birth of modern language. Atkinson, did it differently. He zeroed in on the phonemes, meaning the basic distinctive sounds or units of sound by which words are represented, meaning sounds like e, o, u, te, be, de, all those sounds. He basically narrowed down on these, and what he found that there are 500 languages around the world right now. But what he did was he applied mathematical methods to linguistics, and what he discovered is that the further humans traveled from Africa, the fewer number of phonemes actually survived. So the most number of phonemes or different distinct sounds that man produces was the greatest in South Africa. And as man traveled from continent to continent, from area to area, the number of phonemes in a language actually decreased. So to give you a little bit more onto this topic, what he says is many African click languages or click-clocks consonants found in all 3 Khoisan These are Southern African language families, have more than 100 phonemes, while the languages of Oceania, the spoken language of the Pacific Islands, Papua New Guinea, and New Zealand being the furthest migration route out of Africa, have only 13. The modern English language has approximately 45 phonemes. So we use 45 separate sounds to actually produce our speech and produce our words. Now, what Atkinson found actually challenges a long-held belief by linguistics that the origin of spoken language only dates back some 10,000 years. What Atkinson is hinting at is that if African populations began their dispersal from Africa to Asia and Europe 60,000 years ago, perhaps the spoken language had to exist around that time and, as Atkinson hints, may have been the catalyst for their dispersion and subsequent vibration. So even though we don't know where language comes from or how it originated, according to Atkinson, it looks like it's the southwest portion of Africa that has the most variety of phonemes or sounds that are produced by the tongue, and it gradually, the number of phonemes decreases the further we are away from South Africa. So an analysis of the sounds used in 504 languages around the world found that languages tend to be less diverse with fewer phonetic sounds the farther their speakers are from Southern Africa. And this pattern, of course, implies that language might have originated once among early humans, then become less and less diverse the further humans migrated from southwestern Africa. So until the point where we reach current and anatomically modern humans, the shape of the hominid vocal tracts didn't permit the modern range of speech sounds. But that does not mean that language necessarily began then. Earlier hominids could have had a sort of language that used a more restricted range of consonants and vowels, and the changes in the vocal tract may only have had the effect of making speech faster and more expressive. Some researchers even propose that language began as sign language, then gradually or suddenly switched to the vocal modality, leaving modern gesture as a residue. Now, as far as the Knowledge Book is concerned, in Fascicule 7 on page 94, the Knowledge Book states, quote, "All the knowledge has been present since the existence of the universe. However, your world attained calligraphy by the command of Thoth. The hieroglyph can only be deciphered by those who are on that frequency level. And only Thoth unified his frequencies with Ramses. So in other words, Ramses' thought frequency knocked at Thoth's gate, and the first writing started with the hieroglyph, the ciphered universal calligraphy. In fact, even the cavemen were able to receive knowledge by their 6 powers. Then the technique developed parallel to the awakening of consciousnesses. Humankind discovered the printing machine when the eagerness towards knowledge increased. Thus, knowledge spread far and wide," end quote. Now, of course, we use language every day, and there are specific purposes of language that we apply every time we speak. So according to Geoffrey Leach back in 1974, there are 5 functions of language. The first is informational function, and that seems to be the most important since it helps us deliver messages, describes things, and gives our listener new information. And it is also related to such terms as truth and value. And this is an example of informational is maybe Encyclopedia Britannica, the dictionary, all kinds of textbooks, gives us information, okay? Now there is another function, and that's the expressive function. And this is when we speak to express our attitudes, our impressions, and feelings. Now, these words don't deliver any particular information. However, they do convey what our emotions are or what our thoughts are. So, examples of these could be swear words, as well as various explanations, or as far as comics are concerned, is pow, wow, and of course, there's a row of symbols that represents some kind of expletive deleted type of expression. As we continue with the purpose and function of language, there is also the directive function of language. And this is a type of speech that is used to induce certain actions or reactions. The example of such a function is a command or request. Here, the effective and situational meanings of a phrase are more important than a general meaning, which makes this function somewhat like the expressive function. An example of this is maybe a person, a police officer directing traffic, people stopping and asking for directions on how to get to a certain point, some kind of a direction, some kind of command, or some kind of activity. Could also mean a teacher giving instructions on how to write the theme paper. So this is the directive function of language. There is also the aesthetic function, and this doesn't have any particular kind of purpose. Here, words and sentences are considered as linguistic artifacts. And in this way, this function uses words as a tool of poetic art and as certain signs. And here, the beauty of the chosen words and phrases is more important than the usefulness of the information. And for this function, different adjectives such as gorgeous, elegant, stunning are used, or yummy, or loud, or crunchy, or puffy, used in commercials. And there's also another function called the phatic function. And the only purpose of such a function is to maintain social relationships and to begin or continue the conversation. A well-known example of this is small talk about the weather. Such kinds of talk doesn't provide us with any necessary information. It doesn't express our feelings. In fact, it sometimes hides our feelings, but it helps us to interact with people. And every time we meet somebody on the street, we can talk about the weather or work or children or sports. It doesn't matter. Or in the case of the United States, and after the show Friends or MASH, it becomes a topic of conversation for a coffee break or talk around the water cooler. The real reason for such a talk is not our interest, but simply our desire to talk. Of course, such conversations may also contain some interesting information, but it is not the main objective or purpose of this type of language. So this is what helps us maintain relationship in our workplace and wherever we are. Now let's talk a little bit about languages around the world. Currently, there are about 7,000 distinct languages, or according to a study, 7,099 distinct languages spoken around the world, based on the 2017 Ethnologue language database. Of course, this number is constantly increasing because new languages emerge every day, since languages are dynamic and living. With modernization, a third of these languages face the risk of extinction. And we're finding that some languages are being really lost, and we only have vestiges, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 words left of a particular language. Now, what is currently the most spoken languages in the world are English, Arabic, Spanish, Portuguese, Punjabi, Hindi, Chinese, Bengali, Russian, and Japanese. This, of course, is based on one particular source. However, the number of the most spoken languages varies depending on who is doing the study and what they are studying. Now, the Asian continent has the largest percentage in terms of number of languages spoken, with about 2,300 languages, which is about 32% of all the languages in the world. The African continent follows closely with 30%, with an estimated 2,000 languages spoken, while the Pacific is third with 18.5%, and the Americas are fourth with 15%, and Europe is last with 4% of the languages spoken in the world. Now, this is an interesting point. Papua New Guinea is the most linguistically diverse country in the entire world. It has more than twice the number of languages spoken across Europe. It is a multilingual nation with over 840 languages. Indonesia has 709 languages spoken. Nigeria has 527. The United States, by contrast, has 347 languages spoken, with English being the first. And the immigrants from other countries like Mexico, Germany, Arabia, Spain, and Russia have greatly influenced demographic patterns in the United States of America. So despite the fact that America or the United States has the distinction of being the melting pot of all the different languages and nationalities, however, that is not the case. It looks like Papua New Guinea actually holds this, followed by Indonesia, 840 to 709, as opposed to 347 languages for the United States. Now, of course, every language has its own particular rules that govern that language. When linguistics say that languages rule-govern behavior, they mean it has a grammar, or a set of conventions that organizes its proper use. And of course, many of us who have gone through learning English in the schools here in the United States, we know that grammar is not something that was taught very strictly recently. However, I come from way before we did have grammar in high school. So we did cover what is proper, what is not proper. The surprising thing is those structures, those forms that were considered to be ungrammatical and improper usage of language back in, let's say, the 60s, 70s, right now are in the mainstream and are considered proper and proper grammatical form. Now, what these rules do is basically, or these grammar rules do, is actually they set boundaries around the meaning of words and dictate how words relate to one another. In different languages, the rules vary in importance. In English, where you put the word is very important in determining what the meaning is. In Latin, however, and in Polish and in Russian, it's the word endings that are more important. It doesn't matter where you put the word, because it is the ending of the word that determines its function in the sentence and therefore gives the meaning. So syntax actually is a set of rules that for constructing full sentences out of words and phrases, and context is how everything within language works together to convey a meaning. Context includes tone of voice, body language, and the words being used. So the most difficult words or the most difficult languages to learn are those, in my view, that have not only gender distinctions between words themselves, like French, like Polish, like Russian, and the different syntax, the different forms, both the verb take and the nouns take. Okay. So each language, of course, has its own grammar and structure. So to give you an example, in English, the topic of the sentence, the subject, comes first, while the action, the predicate, comes second. In Chinese, in Korean, in Tibetan, in Turkish, for example, the verb is always at the end of the sentence. So since the verb is always given the second in English, when someone is translating from, let's say, Chinese, Korean, Tibetan, Turkish, they have to wait for the end of the sentence to actually figure out what the action is before they can actually translate that sentence into English. Okay. Now, every language has nouns, and nouns, of course, are names for people, places, and things, and every language has adjectives, words that describe the nouns. So then in English, the adjectives come before the nouns. A pretty flower, a tall building. While in French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, Hebrew, Romanian, Arabic, Persian, and Khmer, the adjective follows the noun. Le cheval blanc in French, or el caballo blanco, Spanish, both mean the white horse or the horse white, meaning the noun comes first, and whether it's white or black or green comes later. So when we're learning another language, our accustomed use of where we put the adjective becomes, again, one of those places where we trip up because we want to use our own rules first. Now, every language depicts its own reality. So the idea that different languages capture and construct different realities has been the subject of academic controversy. And after studying Amerindian languages in the New World, the German explorer von Humboldt concluded that every language draws a circle around its speakers, creating a distinct worldview through its grammar and its vocabulary. And if we go back to the definition of language, the first one is that it is a body of words and the system for their use common to a people. And these people are the same community or nation, the same geographical area, or the same cultural tradition. So this is in alignment with the first meaning of the word, or the definition for language. So when we think about German, when we think about Polish, when we think about Tibetan, when we think about Eskimo, when we think about African languages, if we think about the Eastern languages, the Western languages, every one of those languages is specific to a people, it is specific to a culture, it is specific to, or at least its origin, and it actually shows and gives expression to that group's specific philosophy, specific way of doing things, and structure. Now, the Knowledge Book, because of this, says, okay, first we'll go into Humboldt's theory, reflects what the Knowledge Book actually states in Fascicule 34, page 534. Quote, in your world in which everyone has a reality according to himself, herself, the unifications among consciousness is quite difficult. However, quote, for this reason, operations parallel to the universal unification tableau have been projected on your planet, and both individual and mass connections with awakening consciousnesses have been started in accordance with the medium of consciousness. Basically, everyone, not only every nation, not only every language has its own particular worldview, has its own particular philosophy, has its own way of doing things, has its own way of expressing what's going on around them. Each individual within that culture, within that group, also has its own particular worldview. And that is actually the expression of their own particular upbringing, of their own particular specific environment. So each one of us right now has our own view. It may agree with, it may disagree with what we were culturally raised with and like. However, right now, because we need to unify our views, we need to unify our way of looking at things and include other people and accept other people for what they are, and not automatically exclude them because we are not like them or they are not like us. That's why right now there are teachers that are being trained, there are individuals that are being trained to be able to teach others what is possible, to teach others that acceptance is of primary focus, and that everything and everyone is a brother and sister. Now, for humanity to become unified, somehow everyone needs to be able to speak the same language and understand the same language, and that language needs to have incorporated different realities and is used by the most number of people in the world. The world and universal unification is being accomplished both silently and profoundly, and surprisingly, the universal language that has emerged is English. And in terms of the rules for structure of the language, the grammar, where each country, each language has its own rules for grammar and how to form a structure sentence, and how to form thoughts. We need to have a language that basically incorporates many worldviews, many world realities, and it appears that English seems to be this language, because English is everywhere, and everywhere English dominates. Now, it started inauspiciously on the edge of a minor European archipelago. However, it has grown to a vast size and astonishing influence. Almost 400 million people speak it as their first language, its native language, and 1.5 billion more know it as a second language. It is an official language in at least 59 countries, and the unofficial common language of dozens more. No language in history has been used by so many people or spanned a greater portion of the globe. It is aspirational, the golden ticket to the worlds of education and international commerce, the language of global business, the internet, science, diplomacy, stellar navigation, and avian pathology. So apparently if your bird is sick, it is only in English that you'll be able to find what the disease is and how it can be addressed. Now, one straightforward way to trace the growing influence of English is in the way its vocabulary has infiltrated so many other languages. However, prior to that, for over 1,000 years or more, English was a great importer of words, a great thief of words. And English absorbed vocabulary from Latin, from Greek, from French, from Hindi, from Nahuatl, and many others, thereby incorporating other realities and worldviews. So up to a certain point, for about 2,000 years, English has been taking in different worldviews, have been taken in different realities by the words that it has incorporated into its own language. However, now during the 20th century, as the U.S. became dominant and the world grew more connected, English became a net exporter of words. So not only does it export words into other languages, it seems to be changing the shape and the grammar of other languages to be more like English. Now, when I was growing up, I come from Poland. When I was growing up, and when you're trying to communicate with people, it's kind of like Spanglish, where you have one word in Spanish, a couple of words in English, so it becomes a mixed language. So at the beginning, maybe about 30, 40 years ago, that kind of a mixture of Polish and English was frowned upon. It is not something that was to be done. It was not something that that educated people do, let's put it that way. So neither the English speaker nor the Polish speaker would be able to understand that language, because what it did was put Polish endings onto English words, both nouns and verbs, so neither Polish nor English would be able to understand. However, the certain subset of the individuals would be able to understand it. Okay. So the unification of the world through English is one step in the universal unification that is being implemented. Now, the true unification is being accomplished by the knowledge book, through the unification and rising to the same consciousness level, energy level, and frequency level. Fascicle 13, page 177, quote, "The telepathic perceptions of your brain powers are the focal point of the universal unification," end quote. So in order for us to be able to truly understand each other, to be able to really communicate with each other, we need to be able to be on the same wavelength. We need to be able to speak the same language, literally. Meaning when we say a specific word, all of us know what that word means and know how it is used and know what it actually is and what that thought actually is. Now, when we actually get to the point of being at the same frequency level, being at the same evolution, consciousness, energy level, that's when humanity will have reached the consciousness of Mavlana by following the path designed, and it will have received the true universal language, which is the Isilon language. And this Isilon language is defined in the glossary on page 1075, quote, "atomic language, ability to talk with another by conscious communication through thought, not telepathy." And again in fascicle 7, page 42, quote, "You say that the tongue has no bone. We use it as an example. Every word comes from out of there, including the sweet ones, the bitter ones, the loving, and the evil ones. When you have love in your word, friendliness in your voice, and docility in your logic, the gates of freedom are partly open to you, and this brings you infinite tolerance and happiness," end quote. So this is our journey to unification, our journey to be able to be at the same energy, frequency, consciousness, evolution level. And this is the journey at which we will culminate as genuine humans, where our evolution level, our energy level, this physical body that surrounds our spiritual essence is equal. So we originally came in having that spark of the divine, that essence that is at the level of the spiritual totality, and throughout lifetimes, throughout incarnating over and over and over again, we gradually are raising our energy form, our crude matter form, to be at the same energy and frequency level as our essence. And when our essence, and that actually means that we are at the level of God, because there is no negativity in our thoughts, and there is no non-acceptance in our thoughts, which is the definition of negativity. The definition of negativity is that you are not accepting whatever comes at you, that you are judging whatever comes at you, that you are finding fault with something that comes at you, that you always have something to say that it should be different than what it is. So that negativity not only does eventually cause us cancer, that causes disease, however, that negativity also blocks us from evolving and being able to reach our essence and having our external form be equal to the internal form that we are. Okay, and now I think it's time for a break. And you have been listening to the Knowledge Book Radio with Marge Ptaszek. And I'd like to remind everyone that the U.S. Knowledge Book website is www.usa.theknowledgebook.net. And again, telephone numbers for texting, for calling is 973-787-7035. My email address is mmjp99@gmail.com, Mary John Peter 99@gmail.com. And when we come back, we'll continue with our discussion of language. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
The Truth is Funny. Shift Happens with Colette Marie Steffen is excited to welcome Karen Benton as a monthly guest host. Tune in on the third Wednesday of each month at 8 a.m. Pacific Time to regain confidence and trust in your capacity to create change in your life, your health, your family, and your well-being. Karen Benton is a mother, nurse practitioner, certified body talk practitioner, Franklin Method instructor, and owner of Limitless Living LLC. For more information about Karen, visit KarenBenton.com.
Our angels and animals are always working for and around us. Darcy Pariso knew from an early age she felt this incredible presence that was confirmed for her in a Reiki Level 1 course. From then on, she has honed her skills and dedicated her talents to providing answers, inspiration, and tools for people to move past limiting blocks and past traumas to truly live a life of happiness. For more information about working with Darcy, visit darcypariso.com.
Tune in to Knowledge Book Radio with host Marge Ptaszek each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern on TransformationTalkRadio.com. Through many experiences, Marge was led to the Knowledge Book, a gift to humanity in its transition to the Golden Age, and it provided the truth and the answers. She now shares information from the Knowledge Book with you each week on TransformationTalkRadio.com. For more information, visit usa.theknowledgebook.net.
To find answers to life's questions, you need to look within yourself. Dr. Glenna Rice brings your questionable conversations on Transformation Talk Radio each month. Tune in each month for insight into how you can live up to your full potential. Dr. Glenna is a physical therapist, certified Access Consciousness, and Access Body Class facilitator. How does it get any better than this? For more information on Dr. Glenna Rice and her work, visit glennarice.com.
What is a brilliant culture, and how do we create them? Why are they important? Claudette Rowley has created a breakthrough 5-step process to help you align your culture with your business strategy for exceptional results. Looking for a culture that drives organizational excellence? Listen to Cultural Brilliance Radio, the second and fourth Friday of each month at 10 a.m. Pacific and 1 p.m. Eastern on Transformation Talk Radio. To learn more or work with Claudette, visit culturalbrilliance.com.
And we're back on Knowledge Book Radio with March Patazik on Transformation Talk Radio. And let me remind you, the website for the United States is www.usa.theknowledgebook.net. Telephone number is 973-787-7035. This is my telephone number for texting questions, topics, suggestions. And, of course, my email address is mmjp99@gmail.com, Mary John Peter 99@gmail.com. And what we've been doing today is basically talking a little bit about language. What we've done is actually cover a wide area of topics, starting with a definition. And basically that definition showed us that a language is used by a particular set of people based in a certain geographical area and sharing the same culture. And that language will encapsulate that culture, those people, and will be able to be the expression of their thoughts and their philosophy and their worldview in that particular language. This, of course, correlated with the knowledge book that says that every one of us, not only a nation, but every one of us has own particular reality. And that particular reality is shaped by our language, is shaped by our worldview, is shaped by our energy, frequency, consciousness, and evolution level. So each one of us is separate in this way. What our objective is, and what the knowledge book purpose is to actually unify us at a universal level, to be able for us to be able to speak with and be understood by everyone around us. Now, we've often heard the expression, they're on the same wavelength, so they know what they're talking about, and they could actually talk to each other without speaking anything, because they could communicate through thoughts. So this is eventually what will happen to us. We will be able to be given the Isilon language. Now, even though we've found through, we found through our research, is that no one actually knows how language originated. Whether it was sign language first and then the verbal language came in later, when our tongue was able to be developed in such a way that it produced more sounds, because originally that tongue could not produce a large amount of sounds the way it was connected in the mouth. And later that tongue evolved, or the structure of the tongue evolved to make it more flexible, to make it easier to manipulate. Now, there's one thing that happens in the Eastern cultures, because everyone wants to learn English, and what some people do is actually there's this little membrane under the tongue, in the center of the tongue, and that kind of does not allow the tongue to actually go higher than that particular membrane allows it to go. So some nations actually, or some people in some nations, what they do is actually they cut that membrane, and when they cut that membrane, the tongue is able then to produce stronger and better sound when the tongue is raised. Now, when you're speaking, words like L's or R's or that need the tongue to be on the upper portion of the ridge behind the teeth, those will be produced better when that little membrane, or that's the theory is, that when that membrane is cut, meaning that the tongue is becoming more flexible, it can make more shapes in the mouth and therefore produce more sounds in the mouth. When you think about sound, and it turns out that we were given language. When we were at a consciousness level that was able to reach the consciousness level of the holder of speech, meaning Tote, the God Tote, that's when language was given to us. And language was given to us in picture form, in pictograph form of the hieroglyph. And eventually we learned other languages, other form, and of course everyone remembers the Tower of Babel, where everyone spoke the same language, but then division needed to be incorporated, so everyone all of a sudden spoke different languages. So now we're back to trying to bring all the languages together, and that is being done automatically, it seems like, but I'm sure that it is a program that was pre-planned by the higher authorities, where English is becoming the universal language. Before, if you wanted to read anything in the scientific literature, or if you wanted to be understood, the first language, otherwise known as a lingua franca, where everyone communicates through it, or the official language, was Greek. Then it became Latin. Then it became, I think, Italian. Then I think French. When my father was going to school, all the papers that needed to be studied were in German, and right now that lingua franca is English. Now English, as we've discovered, incorporated all kinds of words from all kinds of languages, and one of the worst things they're trying to do in learning English is to remember all the spellings, because spellings change depending on the type of word that was being incorporated into English. So as English was absorbing other words, it was also absorbing other cultures, other worldviews, other ways of expressing things, to the point where at about 2000, when the United States became more of a world power and dominant in the planet, then English now has begun to export words, where other languages are picking up English words, including them in their vocabulary, thereby doing what English did before, is absorbing a different worldview, a different way of looking at things, and being able to describe things differently as well. Now, what I wanted to point out is what we covered in the last, right before the break. We were talking about the tongue. The tongue is an amazing instrument. The Knowledge Book itself says that the tongue has no bones, meaning that tongue is a muscle, and that muscle can make an amazing and tremendous amount of shapes depending on how that tongue is formed in the mouth. So the tongue itself is only connected to the bone at the back of the tongue. The front of the tongue is actually free to change its shape, and you could roll it around in different structures and formations. When you think of all the other muscles in our body, all the muscles in our body except for the sphincter muscles, except for, let's say, our heart muscles, those are independent and they're self-functioning. All the other muscles have opposing muscles. So if you want to move your hand up and down, there are muscles on the top of the hand that contract and lift the hand. If you want to lower the hand, then you've got to contract the opposing set of muscles at the bottom of the forearm to be able to bring it down. So all the muscles have two juncture points. They're connected to bone at 2 points. So the muscle in between has no power, has no way of actually doing anything other than contracting and being stretched out by the opposing set of muscles. This is not what happens with our tongue. Our tongue is free to form whatever shape it needs to produce whatever sound it makes. And that sound is governed by our brains, because our tongues are directly connected to our brains. So depending on what our brain contains, depending on what words we want to form with our tongue will then take the shape being directly controlled by the brain that is necessary to produce a sound. Now, this formation of letters, this formation of sounds is absorbed in early infancy. Little by little, the child will produce a sound, and the parent will correct the sound or will specify the sound that was supposed to be made, and the child gradually, as it learns to distinguish more and more sounds, it then replicates the sounds that it is able to hear. And little by little, the child is able to produce all the sounds that are in that nation's vocabulary, that nation's language. And little by little, that child is able to absorb through the sounds that are made around them, that is able to produce those thoughts and that are acceptable to that particular culture, to that particular nation, to that particular geographical area. And actually, it looks like our tongues and our brains were pre-programmed to speak directly our thoughts. When we speak, we don't have to tell the tongue what to do. Somehow the tongue already knows the shape it needs to make the word and to make the sentence that we need to convey our meaning, to convey our thoughts, to convey what we needed to communicate to the other person. So, when we speak, we directly show everyone, including ourselves, who we are, what we stand for, what our philosophy is, and exactly what our consciousness or evolution and energy and frequency level is. Depending on the words that we produce, we can see for ourselves whether we still have a ways to go as far as evolution is concerned. When we hear ourselves speak words like, oh, she's crazy, he's nuts, oh, he's awful, oh, that person should not be allowed to be in society, or that person should not be dressing the way they are, oh my God, the hairstyle, where did they come from? Those people should not be accepted here. These people are lazy. These people are awful. Our people are wonderful. Everybody else doesn't know what they're doing. When you hear words like this coming out of your mouth, that means that you yourself still have a way to go as far as growing up, as far as being able to accept others and be able to be at the level of Mevlana. Now, the reason why Mevlana is given to us, and the cipher of Mevlana is come, 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 and each come has its own particular meaning. So the first is, in the first come there is infinite love, second come there is infinite tolerance, and the third come there is infinite humility and acceptance. So, and that is our measuring stick. When our words, when our tongues are able to form only words of acceptance, only words of love, only words of tolerance, that's when we have measured up to the standard that we're going to be gauged by, that we are gauging ourselves by. And when we have thoughts and therefore words of love, of tolerance and acceptance and humility, then we know that we're on the right path and to continue on that path. However, if we still have words of judgment, words of rejection, words of disparagement, words of exclusion, words of separation, that means we still have paths to tread, evolution paths to tread, in which case we'll find that our lives will not be very happy because we are now at a point where we are learning through the opposite. Before, let's say before 2000, when the alpha triangle, or the up-pointing triangle was dominant, we always had help. We always were beseeching, we were always asking the universal powers for help and guidance, and we were given that. But right now, in order for us to actually learn our lesson and for us to be tested on our lesson, we are learning through the opposite, meaning if we have stolen, we will be robbed. And why does that happen? Because we need to know what it feels like to be robbed because we have robbed someone else. And it's only when we ourselves can experience the pain of loss, experience this humiliation, maybe not humiliation, but when we experience the loss, when we experience our loss, in other words, when we have money and all of a sudden we were robbed of the money, that means that we experienced that loss, and now we know when we take something from someone else, we know approximately how that other person may feel, and therefore that may stop us dead in our tracks and not do that anymore to anybody else because we know how it feels like and we wouldn't want anyone else to feel the same way. So little by little, step by step, through all these experiences that we go through evolution, we learn our lessons, and we actually clean up our karma. Because a karma, based on the knowledge book, what it says is that karma is still a lesson that is not learned. Karma is still something that we still have to accomplish to be able to learn and therefore not repeat that mistake ever again. So we won't steal again, we won't lie again, we'll be able to follow the guidelines that are given to us and be able to fully succeed in becoming a genuine human. So that's where we're at right now. We're slowly treading the evolution paths. Some of us are able to accomplish all that we need, and some of us are still struggling. But this is where the Knowledge Book comes in and actually has structures. It has programs that allow us to actually go through these lessons and learn what's going on and why it's going on, for us to be able to then change our action, change our behavior, change our language to reflect maybe a higher reality, to reflect the Mevlana philosophy. And that, I think, kind of wraps it up for this week. So I just want to remind you that that we're here every Tuesday, 1 o'clock Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern Time. And that we do have a focal point in New York City. Please look at the website, and please do call the numbers that are provided on the website, because the time of the focal point has changed to the evening, and I think it is right now at 7 p.m. So I need to say this. Please join us again next time. We'll be taking some more topics from the Knowledge Book. Please do send information or questions or topics for discussion on this show to mmjp99@gmail.com. And humanity's verdict is in humanity's hands. As the Knowledge Book states, and Mrs. Chirac frequently reminds us, you are the ones who will save the world. Thank you. Till next time. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Knowledge Book Radio with Marge Potasic. Marge was led to the Knowledge Book, a gift to humanity, and its time of transition to the Golden Age that provided the truth and energies and frequencies. Now, she shares information from and answers questions about the Knowledge Book with you each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern on TransformationTalkRadio.com. For more information, visit Marge at usa.theknowledgebook.net.